that behind.
We'll see. Okay, good evening. It's October 27th meeting of the Financial Policies and Procedures Working Group. Tonight we're going to review some proposed changes to the investment policy, the financial management policy, and review changes that were made to reflect a court ruling on the health insurance policy. And with that, I'll pretty much turn over to Steve, who I think is driving most of these discussions tonight.
All right, we have the investment policy first. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
I sent out a memo before that outlined the changes to it. This policy
Yep.
was written back in 2009. It was my second year here. Town previously didn't have an investment policy. And it was just time to do some minor updates to it with some changes that we've gone through. Very minor stuff. In the first page under the scope, we're taking out references to when the town has a GASB 45 account. At that time, it was called GASB 45. Now it's known as OPEB, and we do have an account. So that's handled separately in a different policy.
Is that OPEB? P instead of a B?
OP.
OPEB.
Make it a P.
But you're not paying attention. Okay.
Then it references the joint policy that we have with the Light and Water Commissioners with that. On the second page, taking out the reference to AAA ratings on U.S. Treasury and agency securities because of what happened a few years ago, taking away their AAA rating.
Say that again. Oh, because they may have been AAA and then they're not anymore? Okay. We talked about that before, right? And you manage those and you watch those to see whether you want to make a change or not based on that. Gotcha.
And the top of page 3, with corporate debt, we had A-rated or better for S&P and Moody's. We want to change that to investment grade, which is a BAA rating right now.
And the reason for that?
The reason for that is this part of the investment policy deals with basically the legal list, Massachusetts municipalities, when it's not in a trust account or an OPEB account, and we've voted separate investment vehicles for that. These funds have to be invested either in banks that are headquartered in Massachusetts or according to what's called the Mass Legal List. Mass Legal List is an old list run by the Division of Banks that savings banks used to have to go under since the early 70s or so, or mid-70s. Savings banks don't follow it anymore. Credit unions still follow it. It gets updated once a year. Things really don't get added to it, so it's securities that have been on there for forever. And if the company is sold, they'll tag the new name and the company, but things just stay. A lot of the securities that are there, the debt issuance that's out there is like, Verizon's there, AT&T's there. They're not A-rated bonds anymore. So you notice on your Fincom report, the section that said, these things are outside of policy limits. It's because those things aren't A-rated anymore. So why even kid ourselves by keeping it A-rated? Because we're going to buy some more of that because it's so limited.
Sure.
So we just put investment grade instead.
Okay.
And they are investment grade.
Okay.
The next section for ethics, the treasurer and assistant treasurer, what we have in here is Ann and I, in dealing with any banks, would file something with the town clerk if we had anything at a bank that we deal with that was significant. It's no sense to do this every time. it makes more sense just to do if there's a change in what we have. So that's what this is going to change to reflect.
Okay.
Disclose when
Hey,
there's
Jim.
anything material.
Okay, come on up.
Next change is on page 5.
I've got the stuff that we're reviewing. That may be
These. And whatever.
All right.
Nobody else can show up because I don't have any more copies.
Okay. Sheriff, you do.
Section 1 is operating funds, so this gets into, this policy is divvied up into 2 different types of funds. Section 1, operating funds, is more of the general fund type investments, which is limited really to banks and things like that. CDs, we can do some money market accounts and agency obligations and such. Section 2, when we get to that, is more of specialized funds like the Light Department Stabilization Funds, the Light Department Depreciation Account, Light Department Pension Account, and the special rules for that.
Take mine. Okay, Jim, you go ahead. We're good.
So in this section 1, bottom of page 5, it's limited. It used to say no more than 30% of the town's funds. We want to say now 35% of the funds in this section. So what's happening is when this policy was written, the town had $30 million on hand at any one point in time. We're now at $55 million, averaging 55 recently. So there's a lot more funds. Things get harder to diversify, especially when we get to section 2. There's only a couple of major players that deal with municipalities, the Bartholomew's, Rockland Trust is another player. We diversified out of Bartholomew a little by sending some Light Department monies over to Rockland. But we want to keep these things specific to the 2 different types of accounts now. Because when we get to section 2, most of that stuff, because we changed with the light commissioners, they wanted to get out of CDs, for example. So we reinvested all those things more into the legal list type of things, which aren't insured accounts.
Okay.
So this is saying 35% of town's funds.
And why the increase to 35 from 30 again?
It was always 35.
No, he said 30, but that
He
has
said
to
30,
change. He's
right.
red line, he's changing it.
Okay.
He said 30, right.
Okay, we're listening, we're paying attention.
That's good, I'm
See?
glad. I throw these little things out there every once in a while.
Wake up, wake up.
It's all good.
So 35% in this particular section. When we get to section 2, you'll see it's the same type of language change that's done. Page 6, it says, as a sound practice, the treasurer will attempt to maintain no more than 25% of the town's total funds in this section in one financial institution, or 35% with a single advisor. So this is more of divvying up some of the dollars we have, not only in banks, but with advisors if we use them. Section 2 is other special funds. You say trust and other special funds. Trust funds have a separate policy that the trust fund commissioners deal with, so
Okay.
it's not really in here. Special funds, we're talking stabilization accounts, Light Department accounts, as I mentioned before. Took out the reference to the 32B fund. That's when the town used to be self-insured for insurance purposes. There used to have to be a separate fund where all the premiums went into. That no longer exists, so we took reference to that out. And on page 8, again, it's the same change in the middle of the page, no more than 35% of the town's funds in that particular section. And those are the only changes.
So does this policy come into play with the bond rating and other things as well? Or is this really just for your own professional process to have this in place?
Both. It's looked favorably upon that we have an investment
Yeah.
policy for the town's funds, but it also gives some guidelines.
Yeah, okay.
So the next treasurer that comes in, that he's got someone to work with.
Okay.
Before we had really nothing.
You're not going anytime soon, are you?
God, no.
Okay, okay.
Just checking. So that's my only changes with the investment policy.
Okay, so
Pretty much house, I missed the beginning, but pretty much house.
there-
Yeah,
Yes, don't
basically
really-
all it is.
There's no really strategic change in there at all. So aside from this team saying you want our approval, what is the process now for updating that exactly?
We approve it to send it to the Board of Selectmen for
For their
approval
approval.
of the policy.
Okay, that's what I
So we
wanted to-
recommend the policy.
We recommend it, so they approve it.
Recommend it.
Can I just go back, just the GASB 45 fund?
SB 45, right?
Yeah, just explanation as to.
That was how we referred to the OPEB fund before there was an
Okay,
OPEB fund.
Okay, all right,
That's the GASB rule that established it.
gotcha, all right, just
So
to know what
the
that.
policy hasn't been looked at since before we
what the
didn't even
OPEB.
have one. so,
Okay.
yeah.
Very good.
And the one typo is in the next line, Jim, it's OPEB instead of
Oh, yeah, yeah.
OB.
OB.
Okay. Just a
I did
typo.
the same thing here, too.
Okay.
Just can't get good help these days.
So how does this group,
Anything else? Do you have any questions? Any comments?
Looked good, I just didn't know whether there was a distinction between the policies that need to be approved by just the selectmen and those that should be approved by both the selectmen and finance.
This is the current selectman policy, so it should.
Okay, it's as distinguished from the financial management policy, which is both. Right?
FinCom doesn't have to
Yes.
approve this one, is that, that's what you're
Yeah,
asking?
that's what-
Okay.
okay.
All right, so you want a motion then? Yes?
I'll move that we accept the changes to the Town of Littleton investment policy as written and presented by Steve.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Your audience.
And a heck of a fine audience you are.
Meeting after this?
You'll probably rule me out of order at some point.
We got a gavel here, be careful.
All right.
That should have been a motion to recommend, that's how I.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Thank you.
Oh, you got enough of these? Oh, Paul doesn't have one here.
What is the management one? I did read the online version, but I wasn't going to pick up 17 pages.
Things get expensive.
Set?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the recommended changes to the financial management policy. It's just the 4 pages that had changes that we're looking at. Section 12 is the undesignated fund balance. Typo in letter C, it should be OPEB. I did it again. Down here. And maybe, Bonnie, you want to talk about this, since this is
Sure.
more along your lines?
Basically, this is the last version of the financial policies that were adopted addressed the adoption of a debt exclusion stabilization fund and the use of, other stabilization funds. So what we wanted to do, now that that's been adopted, is kind of apply the use of the funds, the undesignated fund balance, to be able to allocate funding into those accounts, to include OPEB and the Capital Stabilization Fund and any other reserves that we might need to appropriate to. So in the previous version, we're recommending an increase to the amounts that you can appropriate up to these reserves from 10 to 20% of the excess balance in undesignated fund balances. I know that sounds like a lot, but at this point, we have just shy of $7.8 million in undesignated fund balance. Now, that's not a one-time balance. It's not something that just happened in this fiscal year. It's been something that we've been accumulating over the last 10 years. We use about $1 million of that annually on the capital plan, but additionally, through our financial policies, there are certain amounts of revenues, 10% of new revenues coming in do not get appropriated, they then go into free cash. So anything new, the additional amounts for building permit fees or certain amounts from the meal excise tax or room excise tax gets accumulated into this account. The other thing that contributes to it is any funds that are not expended through the budget process. So if we received, for instance, the highway department didn't spend all of their wages, that money would then go back to the general fund and through the undesignated fund balance. So that's kind of how this has arrived over the last 10 years. We're at a level now where we are well above the 5% minimum that we need to keep into the undesignated fund balance, which would be $3.4 million. We need to keep that in there in case there are state aid cuts or there are reductions in revenues on the levies, the collections go poorly. It's the buffer, it's the cushion.
Good
So
business practice,
we leave
yep.
it in there just as practice. So at that, with our buffer at $3.4 million and our normal drawdown of about $1 million a year for capital, there's still an excess amount in there that could be appropriated for other purposes and still leave us in good standing with our financial policies. So what this would do is allocate those additional funds above, up to 20% for each one of these buckets. So you could add an additional 20% of the amount above the benchmark balance for OPEB, for other additional reserve contributions, such as the debt exclusion stabilization, regular stabilization, capital stabilization, and allow us to accumulate money for future projects that might be coming online, like the fire station, or any other projects that would be deemed important for the town to address.
So, and it was 10% before, just to keep more in the rollover bucket, basically.
Yes, but we've adjusted the rollover bucket amount to
Right.
the 5%
Yeah,
level.
I know,
So
I
we're
understand.
comfortable with that.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that we have to appropriate 20%.
No, I understand that, right.
It's up to 20%. So it gives a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I know. It's just interesting to me that it was 10% before, and now we go up to 20. And
It
we'll-
allows you to go up to 20. So
Okay.
it would,
okay.
if there's a
It
desire
just gives you
to
more
do that.
more flexibility to put more in some of the buckets if you choose to.
Correct. So based on that, if we, I don't know, Steve, did you pass out this
I will.
worksheet?
Oh,
No, there's a lot of small print, but.
well, there's one here for you if you want it.
We're still on section 12.
Yes. So if we took the actual free cash amount and then backed out the reserves and what we would normally spend on capital, we wanted to show you what that might look like for fiscal 2017. And we've also populated it with data from prior years, so you can see that. So if you look at the 2017 column, you can see the free cash figure, certified free cash at 7.799975.
Yep.
Up there.
Yep,
Okay.
got it.
So what that would allow us to do is to put into stabilization 739, which is the normal 55,000 that we would be putting in to meet our 5% reserve, plus an additional 684,000, which is the 20% above the benchmark balance. Then you could put into debt exclusion stabilization upon being established at town meeting, 684,000. You could put into capital stabilization, 684,000. OPEB, 684,000. You'd still spend your normal capital of $1.1 million, and it would additionally allow you, if desired, to put funding into the CPA account to get the additional state matching. We're just trying to walk you through what...
So these are all at the 20% level?
At a full 20%,
Okay.
what that would do. So that would provide a total use of 4.363, and the unused balance would be 3.4 million, which would leave us with more than what our benchmark balance would be. So I know it's a lot to take in, but we wanted to kind of show you.
Just to illustrate where that 3.4 million sits, you can see the rolling averages for those numbers for either on a 5-year basis and a 3-year basis. So we're right back to a normal. So it's not that we're hitting free cash, anything more.
Not drawing it way down.
Right.
Yep.
Keeping the reserves that we should have according to the policies.
In the only money that really the town couldn't go get if it needed would be the OPEB, is my understanding. Once you put in
Yes.
OPEB,
It
it's
stays in
it's
OPEB.
locked, right? The rest of it,
Well,
town meeting
stabilization
vote,
funds that we could get.
Go
Right.
get it if
Yeah.
we need it,
Yes.
right?
Paul?
Question or observation, the policy, for the most part, pre-existing language, especially, and with the changes to the language that you just described, the 20% to the 10%, et cetera, are primarily across the board, generic institute, kind of part of the infrastructure, the OPEB, the stabilization, capital debt, et cetera. But with one exception, that's the HCPA, and I know we decided to discuss that last year. That's in my observation, a policy decision that's really not any different than other budgetary uses, and placing it here gives it pride of place over anything else that selectmen or whoever might decide to address money to, and that bears out right in this for instance chart, where all of a sudden, if we apply that 20% across the board, 20% is $460,000 here. If we have it in the formula, it almost leads you to automatically assume that, well, we're doing that for everybody else, therefore it goes, without even so much of the discussion. Whereas that $460,000 could go to retiring the debt or the anticipated debt for the high school, the fire station, or library costs down the road, making, tax overrides less likely, whereas this is decidedly discretionary. There's good to it, but it's very discretionary, and I just want to make sure if those decisions are made, they're not being seen as, well, that's what the formula says, as opposed to that's one of many competing interests, and a board ought to be deciding what your priority is in any given year.
You beat me to it, because I was
Okay,
gonna
good.
pretty much have this, I had the same concerns.
Yeah.
As to, once it's down, that's the way it's gonna be, because that's what it says it's gonna be. With the influx of priorities coming through the town, I don't know if it's a wise decision at this point to tie us into some type of formulas like this.
Well, this doesn't tie us into anything. It's
Right.
just the process of when this gets voted and how it gets voted, right?
Correct. Correct.
But
And that's why,
I think it needs to be clear.
There needs to be more
Right.
wording on here,
that-
spelling this out.
This
This
is
a different
subject
class.
to
I agree with that.
annual review of your spending priorities. Otherwise, it very easily could
No,
become
I-
a formula.
Exactly.
That would be point number one. Point number two is I specifically don't see the rationale for having CPA spelled out separately there when it really is just another budgetary use. I understand how we can get matching funds from it, but we're not getting into a lot of other particular programs. That's the only one we're signaling out and giving a place in the order.
this was put in here really to just give the option of having the ability to fund CPA with free cash.
I understand.
If the board, if the.
But even if it
board
weren't
wanted
in
to do
there,
that.
it could be.
Right.
And so could a lot of other things.
I agree with that, too.
And the one thing I think about CPA is that everybody is looking at it as the multiplier, the multiplier on the money going in. And that's already down to 17%, something like that. So, like
What, this year?
most states,
Oh, really?
yeah, so, like most state programs, started at 40, went to 30, and it just...
Still not a bad return.
Well,
Even at 17%, still not a bad
Absolutely,
return.
but, will it stay there? So
Right, gotcha.
I think that's, on a case-by-case basis, that should be looked at. And I think the language in here should be, on an annual budget cycle or something that says, yep, you look at it, to your point, on an annual basis.
It's on that list, and there's going to be expectation from some folks that they're going to, if there is money available, get it, and at that level, in which case, one-time funded projects like windows at, church buildings get funded at the expense of something that the town department wants because they're below them in the list of priorities.
Well, we've got a you got a ladder truck coming, which is $1.2 million in a couple of years, you know?
Exactly.
You know, that kind of thing, as long as it's all on the capital list. And
But we're
it's-
not calling out fire department specifically here.
Right.
You know, so I
So would you classify the CPA fund as part of the budgetary issues bucket?
Why not? I mean,
Just asking.
the fact that we get a state reimbursement, to an extent, probably warrants there to be some language about CPA somewhere in the document. I just wouldn't have it in this list here, because I think its needs are already covered under budgetary, and it risks having it gain an edge on other programs.
The reason it wound up here is in the appendix that we voted last year and the selectmen approved. One of the funding sources that's mentioned specifically in that document is free cash.
Okay, that
That's
doesn't
fine.
preclude it from being there.
So it's covered there, so it's already spoken to.
So if it's spoken to there, all we did here was to incorporate it in there, so it's
But ahead of
part of
budget.
the equation going down. It's at the bottom of
No, it's
the
not. There's
list.
one item below it, which is everything else the town may want to do.
Which isn't easy to get to.
Yeah, well,
Still, decisions have to be made.
Personally,
That's-
I
it
think
didn't take too many
there's
keystrokes to get them $460,000 right here.
other funding sources that you could look at to fund CPAs.
I'd make
like
the argument, since you
mitigation
already
funds
included
and
that
things like
language and you
that.
don't need it here.
So,
So one of the things we should, if there's heartache in having it in this section, it doesn't make sense to keep it in the appendix.
Why?
no, I disagree.
I disagree too.
As a funding source?
Because it is a possible funding source.
Along with any other budgetary maybe. I wouldn't even be opposed to including a parenthetical with
Well, you could put it under the
Within the-
budgetary issues, that description, put something in there to
Yeah.
say, it's-
e.g., CPA funding. But
So include it in, remove it and replace it and address it in I?
yes.
Okay.
And I'd like to just, I need some more time to think about the other buckets too, as far as making any type of motion for tonight. But I agree with the CPC, the budgetary, it's a budgetary issue.
Yeah, the only thing I see is that in the pecking order, it is pretty much last, other than all others, none of the above. And it does have to run the gauntlet of the budget process, because it's got to be approved by town meeting. Somebody has to stand up and have town meeting approve it.
that list suggests it's different than the budget, because the budget is mentioned below it in the order of priority. My point, but anyway,
Well, Steve, what do you mean by budgetary issues?
We, by policy, it's not operating budget.
Right.
So we've covered just about everything else above it. Any kind of
Right.
fixed spending or special spending,
So
as far as capital.
So what kind of things could that
To get it
even
down
be?
to H would, to that budgetary usage,
It would,
it would never happen.
when it was
What if
originally
you-
drafted, it was for like an emergency use. Say you had an event like we had with the ice storm, and we didn't have enough money in other accounts to grab. And we needed to grab.
You
You could
needed
grab
to,
that rather than going after your stabilization fund or
Right.
something else. It's just if
Correct.
you had the money there, let's use that.
Right.
Right.
It was an option. It was just put in there as an option.
well, CPA funding are capital projects, so why wouldn't it be covered, just to make everybody feel good, it's already covered higher up the list under G, additional capital projects. CPA is not.
They're not
doesn't
all
call
capital.
operating.
They're not all capital. though,
Because it
right?
wasn't in,
What isn't?
well, I think it wasn't intended to take away from the 2.5% that is available for capital. It was
20%.
allowed to be used in addition to the 2.5%. Again, upon approval of the board.
Guess I have to go back and revisit the whole CPA thing. I'm trying to remember now what the the funding cycle is in terms of the request versus the funding and how we're doing all that. Again, let's see, it's been a while since we've
Well,
talked about that.
Well, I thought that what we were talking about when Keith brought up the idea of being able to basically run a project through CPA to get the benefit of the match
Right?
was on a project-by-project basis, if there was a worthwhile project that the town wanted
Right.
to do. But here, what this appears to do is put money in there in anticipation of maybe having a
Right.
project.
That's what does it.
And that, I get a
Right.
little squishy on that.
Right.
Well, I think you're close, but the blended CPC, CPA funding was not sometimes specifically for any project. Mitigation funds that, for recreation, no project designated, kind of, that was a kind of a push to get the CPC and the CPA money funding blended, so we could able to do that.
Okay.
So you're on the mark, but I just don't think that, because we might have a project, yes, if it's specifically designated for a project, but sometimes it's just put in there to earn the 17%,
So
period.
it's almost like another funding mechanism for those other capital projects, then, as opposed to,
It certainly is.
Yeah, that's really what it is. You are putting
It
money away to get the
certainly
money.
is.
and then-
Absolutely.
And then we say
Certainly
for
is.
that one, we're going to fund it out of that versus out
Correct.
of the other capital
Correct. Absolutely.
But
account.
as long as we're knowing,
Fits one of the buckets, right?
Sure.
and there is some level of control over it.
Well, the control would be the CPC committee. Is the project, does it fit that
Within the
funding
four
source
walls
within?
of the-
Right, exactly, and then,
Okay.
what's the mechanism to get it out? Obviously, town meeting.
Is town meeting, right?
Right.
So that's where the rubber can hit the road there.
Exactly.
So section 16 of the policy, which I just put up, talks about Community Preservation Act funds. So there's no modifications proposed here, but it basically just states that the town can appropriate additional funds into CPA. And the reason that we added this into the free cash language is to show where it fit into the priority of the free cash distributions.
It's the appendix that was voted last year. It's at the end of the document, Bonnie. It's a separate document then.
It's not
But
this one.
there's an appendix that was voted to this. I may have it.
But it's not the only way to get money in there, is it?
No.
That's the point, I think, right?
No, we're just trying to address it.
Right.
Other funds that can be appropriated.
Otherwise, it's part of the overall budget for the year. We decide we're going to designate so much money to go to that.
If we decided free cash would be a source that would be used to augment CPC. In other meetings that we've had where we've appropriated money into it, it's been through mitigation funds,
right.
items like that.
But at the end of the day, it has to be voted in by town meeting.
Absolutely.
Correct.
So,
Absolutely.
Yep.
Finance Committee can opine, Selectmen can
Yep.
opine, or somebody has to sponsor it.
Sure.
So it would be the town sponsoring it, i.e. the Selectmen, I would think, sponsoring it going in, because it's funds that would be available for other town use that we're saying should go in there. So I think it's got the checks and balances, so whether it should be 20% or some other number, I don't know, but
Following our
it
own,
feels like it's not that far off.
and our own policy, makes the point of saying in the following order. So if CPA is treated differently than other potential spending sources in this list, then we have already set a policy where it has priority over other budget uses.
So
Well, that's why I was asking, what is J? Because I think most everything else is covered above it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what J is.
J is the exception for an emergency. That's what J is in there for. Because we wanted to, when it was originally crafted years ago, we wanted to leave it out in case we had another ice storm, or we had the flood like we had for 119 culvert collapsed, and items like that you needed to address, but you may not be able to within your policy, and that's why it's labeled as an exception only.
You mean I, there's no J.
Right, so it's not just, so is it budgetary uses that the right term for that? Should it be,
Could Would be extraordinary uses?
Right.
extraordinary
Maybe that's better.
emergency
Yeah,
or
right.
something.
Right.
I think that might allay some of Paul's fears, that CPA comes in above something that the town might want
Right.
to do. I don't know.
No, I would agree, maybe budgetary uses is not the right title for that.
So here's the CPA appendix that was voted last year, on the second page of that. It says, as a municipal revenue source, undesignated fund balance, free cash could also be added to the CPA fund.
I think that's okay. I think what the point was, not knowing what CPA was above this budgetary uses was more of a...
Yeah.
So how does it fit into that flow?
Well,
If you're saying it's here,
What is the
but
flow?
it's not listed as one of the items here, how does it get in?
Well, what if it's just
It
below
doesn't.
the budgetary and extraordinary items? Because then it's you've taken care of, if there's something special, that's more important, then it comes first. And if there's still money left and you say you want to do it, fine. But still spell out that it's a different class of some sort. It's an option that we have to do to get state matching.
Right, and there's nothing to me, here, there's nothing that says that you have to put money in D every year, but you could put it in E or F.
But it says, therefore, the following policy must be applied in each budget cycle. So...
And then later in the following
So,
year, too.
I-
But
Yeah.
still, it's up to 20%, it still could be
Well,
0%.
I think the order,
Yeah, you
if,
could vote 0%.
But it's
I
the only
understood.
specific spending program that gets called out by name, whereas with this whole concern we have about if it's not on the list, it doesn't get funded, that could apply to any department or any
Sure.
use. So why is this one any different?
It's just because it gets state matching. That's the whole reason. It's just you put extra money aside to make sure that you get the matching, and then you use it
But
in the
we've already
budget
spoken to
process.
that in the appropriate other places in the policy. That doesn't really speak to
It was-
where it is in the
It was
priority. of-
added there because of that sentence.
So-
Take that sentence out, then we should take that sentence
I'll play
out.
devil's advocate on it. If you look at, therefore, the following policy must be applied in each budget cycle.
Yep,
Okay?
yep.
See number 3 where it says benchmark balance must be met before funding items F through H. This is how the existing language reads. So where the CPC is listed in H at this draft, or after F, if we don't meet the benchmark balance of 7.5% in free cash
Yeah.
of the total
F,
operating
G,
budget,
H
you
don't
can't
get funded.
fund, you could not put free cash monies
That's
into.
understood.
So,
Understood.
where you could put it into OPEB, there are other reserves that you could augment, but not CPC. So if that's a concern, that's
No,
something
it
that...
just, I read that. It should be G then. Still, I don't see the compelling argument why it is in there, which suggests to anybody reading it that, it's got a
Has to
higher
be addressed.
priority.
So where else would we put it in, Paul? Would it
Where it
come
already
as part of
is.
the capital? Where would we allocate money to it if it's not here? If it's not part of our
You
free
can
cash?
allocate money to it here without that
Just
mention.
using the special bucket?
Sure, the additional capital project, the CPA
Oh,
project.
okay, but then so then
Okay.
that's part of your 20% and not an addition, and on another 20% on top of what you're already doing. Is
So
that
you
what
want to
you're
move it
saying?
up to G from it?
I just,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree.
All right, I hear where you're going now.
it's the name, it doesn't need to be addressed. We already speak elsewhere in the policy that it's possible to fund it through here. So therefore, since that's been spoken to elsewhere in the policy, then wherever it pops up on this list as an additional capital project, or that's probably the only place, or just a straight B capital project, well, that's probably where you'd fund it.
Okay.
But do we spell out here that it could be funded from
just says...
other capital funds? Or no, I guess because that's not going to a fund or anything, that we're just saying that that's capital money, and so we could then say it goes here.
Designated CPC.
What's that?
I said, yeah, through the capital fund.
Yeah.
So
As a funding source for a capital project.
Correct.
I can live with that.
I
That's
can
fine.
too.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely fine with that.
So I guess my other concern with this is, I gotta just think it through, and the 20%, if if there are priorities in the town that requires a higher designation than 20% in any of one of these buckets, so to speak, how can that be addressed?
Go down to the special bucket again, the end.
But it's gone before then.
Yeah, it's gone before.
Well, maybe not, because these are all up to 20%.
I know, up to,
You don't have
what
to.
I'm
Up to
saying,
10%.
right, I understand that, I
So
understand
you
that.
could address it
Five
in
this
G,
year.
because say you've already met, say you put 20% into your debt exclusion
Yeah.
stabilization, and then you want to do another 20% for a project.
Okay.
You could say,
Down
we're going to
to
do it
G.
for this project and stick it into stabilization, or wherever, or just earmark it for the project. So you
Okay.
get 40% for,
In this case,
we don't have that allocated here,
okay.
but we could. And you could say,
So the capital is, as designated in your spreadsheet, is based on historical cost.
the capital line is based on the 2.5% of the operating budget.
Okay.
So that's
Plus-
historical.
Okay, so, and then plus a 20%
No.
increase.
No, that's just capital where it is.
Okay, so, but in this, under G, we could go above and beyond
You
that by
could.
20%.
Absolutely. And you could lower other buckets to fund, some of the 20%.
Sure, no, I get that, I get that. I'm just saying, with change in priorities, change in environments, moving forward,
Yep. If we wanted to fund
something.
the ladder
What-
truck,
A ladder truck, or
1.2 million.
yeah,
that's-
whatever, I can't think right now, but
Yeah,
whatever it may
a
be.
big ticket
I
item.
don't want to turf field, whatever the case may be. We're,
Don't
I
wanna
want
be
to,
hamstrung.
I don't want to be hamstrung, right? So, I guess,
But let's talk about.
and this is a unique situation because it happens every 5 years. So it's not as if this free cash is, we keep the
Keep that
3.2.
lunch every
Exactly,
year.
Right,
exactly.
and the lunch.
So it's a one-time
Opportunity, right?
opportunity,
It's
exactly.
an opportunity to do some planning and put some money aside. Yes, absolutely.
And it's for a 10-year, accumulation of.
Right.
Of good planning. It's-
So, getting back to this CPA stuff, can I make a suggestion then? In this appendix that we have, which says, as a municipal revenue source, undesignated fund balance, free cash could also be added to the CPA fund. Can we add as a funding source for capital projects?
I think that's what they are.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
what
I mean,
we're
that's
saying.
kind of what it
right?
is.
It ties it to the language you
Yes,
already have. on the
right,
list,
yeah.
That's fine.
Yep, that's good.
So back to my point, is there an out we can put in this document for a ladder truck, for recreation fields, for, if, what language,
What free- yeah,
Some
what
of it's
free-
already,
frees
you've
us
already
to
got
do.
exception only with the approval, you've got budgetary
Yeah.
issues here. That
Other
should
capital
Okay, I
projects?
guess,
pretty much anything
yeah,
else.
but
you want.
still, it ties in, look at your spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It's already tied into that, you know what I mean? So if we want to go over the 20%, so I guess we could.
We
have
can use
Yeah.
item
I guess the
A,
budgetary-
A, the stabilization, you put it right in the stabilization earmark for that purpose.
No, I get that, but again, it's a 20%.
Before you even get to that, the top item, A doesn't have a 20% attached to it, right?
It's to maintain the minimum balance as funded as
That's
detailed.
that's just
So
a minimum.
The minimum is
Right,
5%.
So, I guess, again, coming back to that, the language of budgetary uses, maybe changing that for an out type,
Well, but I think it's there, and I think to go to this, you really want it to be an exception, and that's okay. If it's something that we know
Sure.
it's a town priority, you've got it all here, the Board of Selectmen and Fincom. This is something the town really wants to do.
But I think what you're trying to get to
Well,
is
yeah,
covered
question.
in the G, additional
What would, for
capital.
instance,
Well, but
2.5%?
he doesn't want to be limited to
of the operating budget
20%.
be this
That's
year?
where he's
Say
going
what
at.
the
You
next
have
level would
debt
be.
exclusion, stabilization fund, 20%.
2.5%
Capital
is a
stabilization,
million.
So we're gonna use 3 buckets
This-
for one truck,
20%.
All I'm saying is.
That's the amount
what I'm
that gets
saying
used
is,
on capital.
If we can
That's
change,
for all capital.
Yeah, I guess it's the budgetary,
Okay.
because I'm thinking
So
about
we need to
the
change-
we need to
council
change that
change
term.
If
We
you
need to change
yeah,
that.
also saving
and
for a
to say-
specific project.
Ordinary
Exception.
Correct.
Whatever,
opportunities
whatever it
for
may
However,
use
it
or
could,
whatever.
So-
because
so
in
we call
prior
it,
years, what you did is said, we're going to
1.2
spend
out
$1
of
million
the
on capital, and we're going to
whatever
earmark
for a fire
$200,000 to go
truck,
to
we
capital
designate it under
stabilization out of
H,
that
whatever
pool.
we decide that
And then
is.
additionally, you can
And
fund
then we
capital
can say, okay,
stabilization.
whatever's
We
left
have
over,
done
we
that.
need to back
Additional
and
lines
see.
to call it
if we
out,
can
because
hit
this
the
is-
We need to
20%.
have, sorry, we need to have one conversation, this isn't
Sorry.
fair.
So,
Yeah, no, I,
so your only hang-up in G is the 20% number.
Oh, yeah.
So it's,
Well, what I'm
don't
saying
put a
is.
limitation on it.
What's that?
Don't put a limitation. It's so far down the list, you're meeting your benchmark
Yeah.
already, so you know you're okay for the next year, right?
Yeah.
You're okay with
Yeah.
our balance at the 5%.
So
So
what,
if you need to spend it down in 1 year, you spend it down in 1 year.
Yeah, and not hit any of the other buckets, is what I'm saying.
Which
you
one
have
were
an
you?
extra in
I'm
there.
just saying,
From D? No, but which letter were you referring to?
H or J or whatever, the last one.
But
Yeah.
Steve's suggestion is G, though, just taking the 20% cap
G or
off.
H.
But you
G or
still
H,
have
that
to take care
budgetary.
of all your other things first.
That's where I'm.
But you don't have to do the 20%. It's
You don't
up
have to, but-
You could do
I
5%.
would suggest.
Exactly.
Right, you could do, if you say that, I don't know, I'm just picking on the truck because I know it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
big ticket item.
Yeah.
But, you know, if we've got a truck coming down the road, then let's fund it, because we happen to have the money now, we don't think we'll have it next year, so we don't have to come back for an override, or we don't have to tax whatever program for it. Why not set it aside to, or we're gonna set half it aside this year, we're gonna set half it aside next year, I don't know. For
In the-
that specific use,
In
earmark it.
Section B, to address Paul's question, and I apologize, Section B reads for capital projects, and it's to appropriate amounts up to 2.5%, or the $1.1 million that I have referenced in here, for capital items for which long-term borrowing is authorized, or for other expenditures of a non-recurring nature. That allows you to do what we did in a previous year, where we had $1.1 million available for capital, but we took $200,000 aside and parked it into capital stabilization, because that's a non-recurring issue. And it would still allow you then to go to the next sections and still do those 20% figures. All it's doing is prioritizing capital projects up front, as making sure that you
The
have
first
money.
maintenance, we have our basic maintenance and upkeep done, basically.
Right.
That's
But
the
if-
1.1, at least out of the count.
Right, make sure we have that.
But my suggestion was going to be pretty close to what Bonnie just said. You're suggesting that it's already allowable, but that's taking a percentage of, or a chunk of the 1.1 of the 2.5%. Why wouldn't you, or how about appropriate amounts up to the 2.5% of the operating budget for capital items? That funds the capital plan, comma, as well as any other planned,
Well, I think that's,
debt exclusion, you know what I'm saying? So that you're not, here you exclusively can fund something only if it comes at the expense of the remainder of the capital items, you know, so.
I didn't follow that, Paul, sorry. Can you walk me through it one more time?
It's almost taking G and adding it into B, you know, additional capital projects.
I don't think we want to do that, though.
Uh,
I think the order is there on purpose. I mean, all of this is good, and I understand where Jim's going and so on, but part of this is to make sure that we don't get excited about buying stuff when we know we have some of these other commitments. OPEB is no fun, and it's the typical, you know,
Yeah, right.
it's no fun to put money there, but it's something we have to do.
That's fine.
And so that's part of this, and this is part of the hard stuff, right? And so some of these other, the other stuff may be more flexible, but I think some of these things we have to just, let's be real about where we are and be responsible on this. So I don't, it
Yeah,
seems to me
that's fine,
if we take the cap off a year, Jim, you should be good. Right? I mean, we still have the thing,
No,
you still may
no.
say 10% up here instead of 20
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
yep,
You still
yep,
have it, but if you
yep.
take that cap off, then you should get what you want, right?
I agree. I mean,
And that is the intent, I think, of
And
the flexibility anyways, right? If there's extra, you do capital stuff, it's still just not one-time
Right,
stuff.
right. And we're gonna work on that, the budgetary uses, I think.
The term?
Yeah, just.
extraordinary uses.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, something, just budget, you think of, November 14th.
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you just.
I agree with you.
get
I
zoned in on
think
it.
we can do a better term on that,
Yeah.
though, make it
And
more
we all
effective.
know, this can't go into the operating.
Yeah, it's
budget.
not.
So,
Right, exactly.
okay, so we have some general, I think, agreement, we need to do some wording on
Yeah.
that. So what about the CPA? Is that out of here now? Are we saying that should not be here now because it's with the capital, it's funded elsewhere in the other capital, including this one? I guess this one could be part of that then, right? If we take the 20% off of G, then that's also a funding source possible for
Absolutely.
CPA.
CPC.
Okay, so then
By the
that
time you get
clears
to the
out
bottom of the
then
list, you
too.
don't need that 20%
Right,
anymore.
exactly.
And I agree, Betsy, with the reminder that, our first priority should be OPEB, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, if we do have a plan for the fields, library, fire station, or whatever, our first priority is, or our first obligation is to fund all these other things. And if G is not hit by that 20% limit, well, then it's, we're at the mercy of two things, what we're left with in terms of windfalls to play with,
Right.
our own planning
Yeah.
of what amount to have and dedicate there, and, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
and then
And
it-
town meeting approved?
Right, always,
I
absolutely.
mean, what's underscored all here is,
We know how that goes.
in addition to a policy, policy works best if there's also a plan.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Speaking of the plan, I mean, this is the year you have the extra to spend.
Right.
Yep.
Those things aren't ready now. So unless you put it into one of these buckets
Right.
to hold it,
Gotcha.
it just rolls into free cash.
No, I get you. I get you. It's,
It ain't gonna happen, right?
That's why it's here
attention.
tonight. Am I right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Not done as I
He's
like.
got the stack of chips already. He's got the stack of chips already.
Okay, so I think you guys are good with the intent now, so you do another draft and we'll set up another meeting for this and go through it. Okay, this is very productive. I really appreciate all the
No, thank you. This
Does the-
is, Steve did a lot of
And
work.
then
Good discussion
The
and so
only
on.
other
This is
piece
good.
was on 11, page 11.
Okay, sorry, let's go
Debt
quickly and
exclusion
then we'll.
stabilization.
Right,
It's
okay.
the same verbiage, it's just put into bullets.
Okay,
And there's a reference back to, the only thing that was added was a reference back to the undesignated fund balance, if I can find where it is.
So, right here.
all this is all new wording
Yeah,
here, right?
yeah.
Everything that's underlined?
It's all new wording, but it's all the wording that was taken out from the next page.
Oh, I
It's
see, you just
all-
moved it.
it's
I
just
see,
all-
I remember that, look at
Bullet
that, you just
stuff.
moved it in.
It's
bullet.
Worded better, I think, in the new version than it was in the last one.
Yeah.
With a reference back to what we just talked about.
Okay, I remember looking at that, yeah, okay.
That looked okay to me.
Okay, all right, and then quickly, do you want to talk about the other one?
The health policy?
Health policy?
Is that pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I think so, it's just to let us know, that was more of an informational thing, correct?
Yeah.
You had to change it
This-
based on state law anyway?
The old policy said that the employee had to work for the town of Littleton for 10 years before they could get health insurance in retirement. The Mass Supreme Judicial Court said, no, towns can't put that restriction on it because it's already voted into 32B that you would provide health insurance to retirees who qualify for a pension, basically. 10 years in the system and
In the
not just...
system, of the town, they still have to have 10
within it.
years in the system, but not in that particular
Yes.
town, they have 10 years in the state, okay.
So we had to, our policy was in violation of that. We had to change our policy to say 10 years in the system. But the caveat that we were able to add there was you had to have health insurance with the town before you retired.
Okay.
So someone couldn't come back to the town 5 years after they retired and say, I want health insurance as a retiree. If they didn't have it going out the door, they don't get it coming back.
But part of the change in state statute wasn't that they're going to make the towns pay each other for the percentages they owe each other, right? I mean, that's still an issue, right?
That was actually referenced in the court decision, saying that is the town's vehicle to make up for the fact
Right,
that
yeah.
we're subsidizing work time
Just
at other
gonna Keep
towns.
some lawyers
But there's no
well
enforcement.
employed for a while.
And there's no
It's not
enforcement, and
Need some good bill.
That's-
So we
policy-
change our
that policy-
hiring policy then and not hire people that are within 10 years of retirement? That's probably illegal, right?
absolutely.
Higher than terminally ill.
All right. Okay, so you don't need a vote or anything, that was informational,
That, the
right?
selectmen already voted
Okay.
that policy.
Okay,
Great.
all right. Make a motion
Okay.
here,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Good luck in your finance committee.
Thank you. You don't want to stay? No. You're welcome. Okay.
I had to watch my facial expression. My first three classification hearings with Reed. I got some kickback on
Boy, that was a long time ago. That stayed with you, huh?
We had a whiteboard up there,
Oh,
and
yeah.
an hour and a half meeting.
All right. Okay,
good.
so,
So you
no,
all-
hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Welcome, everyone. This is the October 27th meeting of the Finance Committee. The agenda tonight is a presentation by Park and Rec and Community Education and our new director, Alicia Day. Budget updates from Bonnie. And more updates on our process for the budget meetings with the individual departments. And that's the main items here, I guess. So with that, please.
Sorry, we're never
Please
usually
start.
first, Betsy,
Okay.
so I'm not used to that. So you've all met Alicia, our new director. She's been on board almost 3 months now, right? So she's getting her feet wet and sort of going through a lot of the processes for the first time, of which the budget is probably the most difficult for her based on her emails and phone calls. So for her, most of what's going on is the way things work, as opposed to changes that the commission started to implement once Kate left. So it's probably easier for me to explain where we're at.
Okay.
Obviously, over the last couple of years, we ran at a little bit of a deficit, or at a deficit, and that needed to be corrected. Our first step was we've eliminated driver's ed. The cars are going up for auction, right, the town auction. Okay, so we hope to recoup some of that to offset some of the deficit we've had. We had Chris Hadley, who was the camp director primarily, left in July, and we've not replaced him. What we did was, because of when he left, the camps were in full swing, we were able to take the assistant director, plug him into that position, and sort of coast the last few months, because we don't start ramping up until late fall, around Christmas, starting that. So we're going to need to replace that person at some point, because the assistant director is not a full-time employee. It comes in when the camp runs. But we've been able to get by, so we've broken the deficit down a little more on that. Obviously, the starting salary for Alicia is at a different pay grade than Kate was, so that's helped us out to some extent. We were very vigilant at the beach this year in terms of reducing staffing during slow hours, so we would actually send some lifeguards home if it got slow and the weather was bad. We didn't have them out there all day. And that's really it. We've also worked on recouping the cost of managing the sports leagues. So we started to implement a $5 per player fee. That's gone up to $10 per player. So that we're covering most of the overhead for that now. And then internally, what Alicia's working on that I think is going to be key for us is we're taking each of the programs, breaking it down into revenues and hard expenses. And instead of trying to allocate overhead like we did before, because there was never any real way to gauge where that was, we're just breaking the programs down individually. And then we'll look and see where we are and how that's affecting the overhead usage after that. And then finally, we'll give you your reports in the format you asked for.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's very extremely thorough. So just, I guess, a couple of things to add in. Just, Bonnie and I are working on trying to reformatting the budget as budgeting forms, like Fred had mentioned. So it'll reflect the same format as most of the other towns will be presenting. Also, we're sort of working on reformatting the enterprise account so that the chart of accounts is a little bit cleaner and it's more efficient, so that we'll actually be able to run reports that are really clear moving forward. So that's something that we both are very excited about, the day that will come sometime
Yeah,
soon.
I mean, she walked into a very difficult situation in order to try and do some analysis on it. Multiple reports had to be run in order to get any meaningful data. And she's done a lot of work in streamlining the accounts and really figuring out where the fund balances need to point to, so we can figure out what programs are profitable and which ones aren't. And then more meaningful decisions can be made based on that. But we're 99% together with the report that we need to get together for the 14th meeting, so I'll have that done this week. I'm fully confident that we'll have everything in the format that you're looking for, and it'll be a little bit easier to understand than the prior years. So
That's great.
yeah.
Trying to think if there's anything else. The other piece is the different programs that we're going to be looking at with the loss and profit. We don't want to just jump to eliminating programs. They have so many really fantastic things. So we want to be able to figure out how we can either strengthen them or change them if need be. And elimination would be like a last ditch effort that we want to go that route. We want to try and keep everything that we have currently. Yeah.
And I think also just identifying the success stories. I mean, there are many programs that are, revenue generators, and those are the funds that are used to augment the ones that are not. And kind of being able to highlight those programs to the
It would be
finance committee is
purposeful
gonna be-
too, and not
right,
just it happens, but to actually know what's going on, so
Right.
you can, yeah.
right.
We've also
Leverage
sort of
those.
streamlined the capital plan, so I think we knocked it down to, 2-3 items this year, the long-term capital expenses. Fencing to finish 300 King Street, because it's a bit of a safety issue there with the balls rolling in the parking lot.
And that's been pared back too.
And finally, upgrade to the rec track software, because we have gotten feedback that people are not enrolling in programs because it's online, that it's
Yeah.
too difficult to use.
I think you read track, and I didn't understand
Yeah.
what
I'm
that
sorry.
was.
So
Okay,
the actual registration software
Registration.
is proving to be a
Okay.
hindrance to some of our enrollments, so that's.
Yeah. Okay,
and
that's
it.
interesting.
We pushed everything off into
Yeah.
the future.
And that's something we originally put, when Kate came on in 2008, that's when they started with Rec Track. So this would be the first upgrade since 2008.
So those are the 2 capital projects that you have in your budget?
Correct, yeah.
So Fred, where's the fence going to go out at 300 King?
At the end of the basketball courts along
Left-hand side.
one side, and then we're going to get something so that it's not that one court that's right by the parking lot, so you're not having the balls roll into the parking lot.
Okay.
Yep.
They're going to be 6 foot, 8 foot?
You know what, Ivan knows that, because they
Yeah.
produced,
I think we originally said it
suggested,
was like 10, 8
yeah,
to
we
10.
talked them, we talked them down, it was almost like, we likened it to the athletic facility at the Essex County House of Corrections you see on 495, that's what it was going to look like, so we
Yeah.
brought it back down. Razor wire. Well, we're keeping the razor wire. A more easier level to get to.
But, when they were doing 300 King Street, just keep in mind that even though they've got bollards up there, there was, one of them was supposed to be a removable bollard for emergency, equipment to get back there. You might want to just make sure you don't fence off so emergency equipment can't somehow get back
Now, the
there.
fences are going right at the courts themselves.
Oh, right at the courts.
Right, so
Okay.
it's not going to block anything else off. It's just literally keep the basketball sort of on the courts and out of the woods and the parking lot.
Okay.
Steve's also on the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, so
Right.
maybe you guys should be in touch
Well,
with
it's
that,
whatever it
too.
is
Yeah.
what they had sort of planned. I think we just sort of scaled back the extent of the fencing. We said, you don't need it over there, and you don't need it so high, so we're not adding any more in.
Okay.
But again, Ivan's the fence guy. He's in Maine or something, so.
Yes, it is, actually.
So rumor had it that turf fields for Alumni Field were on your capital list.
The verbiage of it is, so the reality, I think, with Alumni Fields is that it does need a drastic renovation for safety purposes. And that's how we worded it, is that it would be a renovation at Alumni Field.
Not turf field, renovation. And it's
Renovation.
only on our list as
A to
we're
be
kind of
determined.
the people that it's got to go through. Everything else, if they want it there, locker rooms, stands, the rest of that stuff, the school department's got to put on as part of their capital plan. And we've got it on there as a placeholder, there's no amount, and it's simply because I think it's inescapable that something has to be done there, and if we don't have it on the plan, then all of a sudden it pops up in
I
3 years.
totally agree. That's what
We're
we've been
glad
asking
you're stepping forward
for.
to do it, yeah.
Exactly.
We had heard that there might be a track also incorporated around that.
Not to my knowledge.
We've gotten nothing firm from anyone, so it's more literally it's just, you've
We
got to
know it's
upgrade the
coming.
field. I don't know why.
It came up at PMBC
Well,
last week.
there was some discussion about it last selectmen's meeting, wasn't there?
It came up at PMBC, that's,
No, you're right, the last selectmen's meeting.
They did a presentation to
Presentation,
talk
yeah.
about, Mike Lynn from the school, the athletic director, came to do a presentation talking about essentially the state of the fields as they are. Mostly it was about alumni, but they were also talking about the high school field and just talking about the need for a renovation of that field. I think he did talk a little bit about turf, but, from the aspect that we're going as far as the capital plan moving forward is we know that there is a renovation desperately needed out there at Alumni Field, and it's as simple as that.
So who is going around and making presentations? Is it just Mike, or is it
It
a
was
group of
Mike and
people?
Kevin Hunt as part of not as part of our group, but as part of what I don't even know what they are, but.
Maybe
Athletic
they,
director.
I don't
In the school,
I don't know,
Well, there was sort of that
That's the question.
subgroup that tried to,
before.
with Jim Carr and those other people last year. I don't know quite what their affiliation was, but I think it's sort of that same group that's looking at it. Now, again, whatever the recommendation is, if it's natural grass with a nice irrigation system.
Right.
Our thought is, honestly, we don't have enough fields in town to make natural grass work because you'll never let this
Right,
field rest.
Yep.
I don't know why they put a track in, since we just bought a track. But I mean, one of our concerns, philosophically, yes, we need something. We haven't really voted on how we would go about it. But you're looking at probably 10 years down the road, $1 million in replacement fees. And that, if somebody's going to come up with a plan, they need to have a system and a methodology for repair. And
But all of the things that come for maintenance between those 10 years as well. So, we're
Exactly.
talking about different materials, different equipment, different paint, different everything that would need to be used on that sort of surface. So as long as, that whole picture is thought of, I think that that's the important piece to think about.
Have you gotten to the point that if in fact it was a turf, quote, turf field, who would be responsible to maintain it? Because now...
I'm under the assumption it would go back to Parks and Recreation. Yeah.
But it's not a highway department maintenance job. It's,
Okay,
there's
okay.
organization.
So that's a different, okay, so somehow we've got to get
Yeah.
selectmen and you guys and everybody in a room and figure out who's on first here.
But again, philosophically, we support the idea, but there needs to be something in place. 'Cause
Right.
the last, I mean, if you go out to some of the fields in Lunenburg, for example, where I've actually been on that turf, and it's not that, I don't think it's 10 years old yet, and there's spots where it's like running through a swamp, and other spots where it's like running on this.
Right, yeah.
You know,
So that's where that maintenance plan comes. It's super important to have something really well established
So
prior.
if it went to Parks and Rec, would that be something you would subcontract out?
It's potential, that's, yeah, it's a
yeah,
possibility.
it would have to be,
Because you wouldn't have the forces to...
We don't have the staff to
Yeah.
be able to do that.
no.
Or whatever.
No, and I know,
Specialized equipment.
Correct.
All right, we're
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
way
The
detailed.
fluff.
and I know that there's some of the, like, at least one company that does the installation will then can sign you up for a maintenance agreement, and they'll perform the maintenance, then probably comes with some sort of guarantee so that you extend the life of it.
But at least we now have a town affiliated group that stood up and raised their hands. That
Right.
It's in your
It's someplace in there.
realm of, or sphere of influence, I guess. Where last year, when the group was coming around, nobody was willing to stand up and say, yep, we want to own it. So at least we've got that anchor where we didn't have before, which is good.
So I've asked Mike Lynn to come to our next meeting as well. It's a busy time of year for him with all the sports things going on, so he's not sure he's going to be able to make it, but he's kind of penciled us in for next, whatever it is, the 10th, I guess. So we can ask him some of those questions too. And obviously a big question is he speaking for the school department at all, or just for the sports people, or how does that work? Because that's obviously a key component of this. And in his presentation, I mean, because I watched it on at the selectmen's meeting, and it's really not just the field either. He's talking about the whole thing, the area around and the bleachers and things like that. There are a lot of things that need maintenance, and that's a much better conversation to have, right? We're looking more holistically now as opposed to, here's the answer to our problem, well, what's the problem? Well, now we're talking, let's first talk about what's the situation and then start looking at the solutions and so on. So I think that's really good. So we'll see if we come. But anyways.
Because we didn't maintain the ordinance.
Well, and it is interesting, though, that if they're in that bad a shape, then it's not on anybody's list yet, right? Maybe it has been, I don't know, but...
It's on the school...
Bleachers?
Yeah.
It is on their list?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's for around 750,000, ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, it is what it is. Okay, so
There goes the money.
So what interesting things have you learned? Well, I got to put you on the spot on television, all that stuff, but maybe some positive things or whatever you want to share. It doesn't have to be positive, whatever you want to share in terms
About the recreation
Well,
department?
yeah, just in general, coming a little time. I mean, you were doing this at Fitchburg, correct? Which is obviously a different.
Actually, I was going to ask,
Go
I
ahead.
don't know much about Alicia's background,
Right, exactly.
Alicia's background, excuse me, so love to hear a little bit more about yourself. and-
Myself? Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I was previously working at the city of Fitchburg, the recreation department there. I've been in the field of recreation for over 10 years in a lot of different ways. I worked at a university. I was a lecturer for outdoor recreation for 2 years in South Carolina. And I've run outdoor adventure programs through universities as well. So, teaching kids rock climbing, backpacking, all that kind of stuff. So I have more of an adventure ed background. So that might be fun to be able to pull some of that into maybe some of the courses that we do
Well,
here.
Littleton politics is an adventure, so you got to pick.
No, I'm sure it is.
Fred will tell you.
So that's a little bit about my background. I've got a master's degree in sports management from Georgia Southern University and a bachelor's in adventure ed from Prescott College, which is a teeny tiny little private school in Prescott, Arizona. So a little bit about me. I guess some of the cool things that I've really discovered is that we keep hearing these success stories about kids that, grew up in the recreation department. And so I guess a perfect example, and I think I told the Board of Selectmen this the last time that I came to talk to them, was the girl, young woman, that was working as a program aide this past summer. She is very much into photography, and she has actually done the cover of our fall photo, which is really beautiful. It's like this little heart thing. And she's learned how to do photography through the recreation department. So it's one of those things that, I think the word fun gets thrown around too much in the world of recreation, and the truth is that, you're learning all of these beautiful things about your life as you go along. It shouldn't all just be specifically about work. It should be, you should be able to have this balance and have this play and joy in your life. And so being allowed to have that space in your life and, taking classes, learning something new, or, encouraging your kids to do the same thing so that they can be lifelong learners, that's just such an important aspect, to have as part of that community building piece. So, that's been one of the really beautiful things, is just to see all of these kids. And, our sailing department is another, our program is another area where the kids that have learned grew up and now they're teaching. And it's just this cycle, and it's beautiful, and that's really the way that it should be. So, it's pretty exciting to see how successful it has been in some of these aspects for such a long period of time. So it's really, it's a really great thing. So.
Any other questions? No, I mean, it all sounds good to me. I think, clearly everybody's, it's nice to have somebody to come in, and sometimes you just need a new set of eyes that just can look at things differently.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just hard to see things after a while when you're here. So I think that's great. It's going to be very, very, sounds like it's beneficial already in terms of.
Oh, sure, and I'd give particular kudos to the commissioners.
Right.
It's great that you're on board, but these folks went through a period of time where they had to piece things together, and hiring you and solving the problems that Fred was talking about. And that's, I'm sure everybody gets on board on wanting to put out the programs, and then you get stuck with all the rest of it that you don't want to do, but you do.
I know we all enjoy that.
Well, you stepped up, you're doing it right, and this is terrific. From some of the headaches we were looking at a year ago, it's it's a great improvement from our little perspective, and hopefully the programmatic end of it hasn't suffered either.
You do have good support in terms of the committed to the mission and so on too.
Yeah,
It's not just, I know
it's
you
coming around.
Yeah,
It
great.
looks a lot better now than it did when Ivan and I were running things for that brief period. Hard to believe, but.
Your commitment's always been there, and I think that's coming through, so that's good.
Do you have a sense as to when you'll be ready to sit down and review your budget?
Yeah, well, I guess we still have a few pieces to kind of go over.
I'd say sometime next week.
Next week? Okay, yeah, so we can set up something between
Yeah.
Fred, you and I,
Yeah.
and be able to go over that.
Great, okay, good.
Anybody? Alan, you're awfully quiet.
Just wait to see the budget, then I'll have questions.
Fair enough, fair enough.
We're
I'm
live
welcome aboard
asterisks
anyway.
still, Alan, so just.
It's your fault.
Well, welcome, and thank you for all the things you do. It's an important part of the town, I think, and a lot of services, not only just the programs that are for fees and all that, but all the other things which are part of the structure of the town and the fabric of the town, and so we appreciate it, and look forward to working together. So if you need something,
See you
don't be
again on the
afraid to come talk to
14th,
us.
too.
What's that?
See him again on the 14th.
That's right,
Yep.
that's right.
We'll be there, yeah, right after our turkey trot race.
Right.
That's right.
Was it that same day
It's the
again?
same
Oh,
day.
of course,
Yeah.
of
We
course.
always conflict with something.
That's
It's,
right, absolutely.
We'll be ready
Christmas
to go.
Bazaar one year, and
That was.
Just a time of year.
Gentlemen on the
Just- they're just-
schedule.
they're just hard.
snowstorm, too, I think.
Aren't too many free Saturdays that time of year.
So it might not look as nice as I do tonight.
You always have an out. You're the outdoors person, so that's good. All right.
All right.
Thank you
very
again.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Nice to meet you, Alicia.
Thank you.
So they don't bite. Not yet, anyway.
Okay. Good. All right, Bonnie, you gave us a package here, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some updated figures. You might know the budgets are coming in now. They are due tomorrow. So I should have, probably I'll have 95% of them in tomorrow, and I'll have a few stragglers, but I'll get them put into the books and updated into the worksheets through the end of the week, and then I'll have better figures based on this. These are using the assumptions that I've had with step and COLA increases, health insurance budgets, some new growth figures, which we're still waiting to finalize with the Department of Revenue. But at that,
Same question applies.
the figures for 2017 are still in balance with the assumptions that I had shown you previously. They have not changed at this point.
Yep.
I would think that I will have some values in the next 7 to 10 days to be able to plug into the real estate bank, so I'll figure out what the residential class looks like, what the commercial, industrial, and personal property looks like. We are in a reval, so values, it looks like, are going up on the residential class. So that doesn't create new growth. It just means your tax rate might stay relatively flat. Doesn't mean your bill's going to stay the same, but it might make your rate look pretty similar.
We lowered your rate, but your bill went up.
Right. We lowered your rate, we raised your value, and your bill went up. But yes, we are going through the full reval now. It does, still look like the residential class is increasing at a higher rate than the commercial industrial, even with the growth that we've got going on down at the Point and 15 Great Road with the apartment buildings. I think next year...
Meaning as a percentage of the whole town's revenue it's going up, or percentage-wise, the value of residents is going up higher, more than the commercial?
More than the commercial. There is more dollars in residential levy amounts coming on than there are commercial industrial.
So the growth is in
This
residential versus, so that doesn't, given all the...
Growth and valuation,
Yeah.
so it's
Correct.
it's not just the new construction, it's the
It's
value,
everything.
right?
Okay.
The new construction will be new growth, but
Right.
the values are going
Okay.
up too. It looks like maybe next year, the commercial industrial will increase at a faster rate than the residential class, because we'll have Potpourri on, we'll have the other apartment buildings at 15 Great Road, and more development at the Point. So that might flop a little bit next year, which would be great. That being said, we're looking pretty healthy for new growth. We're looking at 900,000 for new growth next year, based on what we see in the pipeline today. But again, we're monitoring that very closely. So I think, you could take a look at this. This will change slightly once I get the values input and I get the final budget figures input along with the capital plan, but I think the assumptions are still pretty strong. I did stay with the increase that I put in for excise revenue that I mentioned at the last meeting, because that seems to be a steady, consistent growth. You can see the numbers that I have input for the school department appropriation. I haven't received word of what their request will look like for next year, but it's about a $700,000 increase here.
But you have been
Percentage-wise,
talking
what's
with them back and forth, right?
Yeah, we've been back and forth. But I have not seen any data yet. They're supposed to have a draft to me, though, this week. That's about a 4% increase, which is about equivalent with what the town's increase is coming in at with the steps and COLAs that are in there. And again, I did reference the health insurance. I did receive word from Maya last week that our claims are running pretty high for health insurance. So we are expecting a pretty significant increase in the double-digit range, but they're running very high. So we are... Ann Essman is great in promoting some wellness programs. She's kind of ramped that up to try and get people into, programs to manage, high blood pressure and weight loss and everything. So she's actually taken a very proactive step in trying to manage that with the employees. So we'll do everything we can. Let's see, the next...
So when you talk about 900,000 in growth, so what do you do with that, with the budget? What do you use for guidance for that, and what do you do with that?
10% of all new revenue gets put away for, goes to undesignated. The rest of it flows into the recurring revenue portion.
Right.
So it is allowed to fund the operating budget.
Right.
So that's why when you look at 17,
Yeah,
there's not a deficit in 17, based on these numbers.
yeah.
So That's where that is. That's why it's in balance for 17,
No,
and it
I-
never has been.
I guess I understand. It just sounds like we've got this kind of a major hit, what we normally have, and are we just peanut buttering it across, or is there some specific goal or discussion about this is how we want to use it, or where we want it to go, or, rather than saying everybody gets an extra so percent, maybe there's something special we want to do with that and still hold the line tight on other places.
That's something that will be something that the boards are going to need to discuss through the mission budget requests, because that's when those items are going to be called out
Okay.
for review.
Okay.
So if there are...
This is basically the peanut butter approach, and then
This
once
is
we go
just-
through the budget
yep.
reviews, that's when
Absolutely.
we'll say, well, this is a priority, and so we need to adjust.
Because every year I'm tasked with, give me what it looks like, it
Yeah,
might
yeah,
be.
right.
So this is a
Okay.
look at what it might look like. Numbers will shift
Now,
based on the board's
Is the tech school
priorities.
assessment a plug, or is that a real number?
That's a plug. We have not received the assessment data yet.
I saw in the paper today that Judy Klimkowitz is retiring.
I
What
did.
a shame, what a shame. We probably don't know how good we've had it the years she's been superintendent.
Yes. I do remember, year after year, being reminded that the Neshoba Tech has the lowest per pupil expenditure cost in the tech schools in the state. So,
And the highest performance scores, too.
yes, they are a good bang for their buck, so I have my fingers crossed.
Okay, but you haven't been given any specific guidance by the Board of Selectmen yet, or anything on what to do with
Just
that?
to gather the budgets based on level staffing and mission, and when I
Okay.
have those, then we'll
Okay,
review
then
them
we'll do
all
it.
next week. Well, I'll
Are the
have them to you
selectmen
next week.
aware that there's, for once, a little bit of a
Yes.
differential, so they can start making
Yes, they are.
choices in their...
There will be choices. Sometimes that's harder,
Yep.
in some respects.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, they are aware, and that's why
Okay.
they gave the directive that they did.
Okay. All right, and what else we have here, capital?
The capital, again, that's coming in with the same,
Trade estimates.
the capital plans are coming in at the same time as the budgets.
Oh, so we don't have the capital
So we
yet.
don't have that yet, but I do have, the earmark amount for capital, which is just over $1.1 million for next year.
And that's
so we
consistent
will-
with where we've been, right?
Correct, correct. So we've been using the available revenue from the declining debt service.
So,
I would remind, we do have the fire station debt service plugged in inside the levy starting in fiscal '20 and onward. So that is in there in the 5-year projections. And the other thing that I provided you with was the draft, which I think is going to be the final version of the schedule for the Super Saturday meeting. I have tweaked it as departments have requested. You can see, Park and Rec is coming in at 10:45 because that worked for them with the race going on. And, other departments had specific requests, but I will send out the final version Friday, just so you have it.
have you seen a draft from the schools yet, or?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do know that they are working on it,
Yeah,
because they've
I-
requested data, and I've
And
had,
they're using the same formats that you wanted, or,
I haven't seen it yet, so,
but that was the promise,
Right.
right? Yeah, okay.
So they only have 15 minutes, though, as opposed to the police department, the fire department, which have more, right? 20 or 25?
generally, yeah. And I base that on the prior 2 or 3 years that we've done this. I've actually made notes of how long people took, so.
Hey, if they want to take more, gladly give it to them this time.
Okay, exactly.
Because we bump up against pretty.
Plus the
similar-
town, and some of these
Right,
other ones,
right.
town clerk and IT, which should be fast. Okay, so we're good with that.
And we've got 45-minute lunch break, which we.
Now, do you have in here, because the other thing that was suggested at the Board of Selectmen meeting was that we talk here, while we're both the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom are together, is to go over the OPEB stuff.
Correct.
But that's not on here, right?
We can add that. I had planned on putting that under finance, because my budgets will be very easy, because there's no additional increases requested for anything, so I'll be level staffing.
So is that like a 10-minute discussion, or is that longer? I mean, before, when we talked about OPEB, sometimes it's gone on quite a while.
The plan is for like a 15-minute discussion
Okay.
with follow-up at another meeting if we wanted to. Steve has committed to being there and being prepared to go through it.
So you got the last bucket here too, right?
OPEB in at
Okay.
3:15 or...
So that's also OPEB.
And the selectmen will be aware that, you know, because sometimes they won't all come and stay the whole day, but would like,
No, this gets shared with the school committee and the selectmen and that way, and all the departments. But again, I'll finalize this on Friday, so don't hold this.
Okay, but that's the
Yeah.
plan. I just want to make sure everybody here was okay with doing the OPEB
Just
discussion there
add
as
that
well.
when you
I'll put the
finalize
OPEB
it.
in there,
Put the
yep,
OPEB in there,
Yep,
just so it's called out.
with an asterisk that says, all selectmen should attend.
Sounds good.
We gave them a seat at the table, didn't we?
right?
And that's in this room, Bonnie?
Okay. That's at the police
Police
station?
station?
Oh, that's right, that's right. Oh, it says right there, yeah.
what was I going to ask you? Oh, and the plan is to have the books available to us when?
Monday. No later than Monday.
Like
Wow,
this, like,
good.
Yeah.
like this coming Monday?
Yep.
Woo-hoo!
Wow.
No excuses
Yeah,
for
I've
that.
been, I've already got quite a few of the budgets
Okay.
in and, you know, logged.
Takes a couple of years to work the hiccups
It
out,
does,
that's all.
yeah. It does.
Good, that's excellent.
Did
All
you
right, do we need for,
Excuse
sorry.
me, did you get anything from Joe Calentro today?
No,
Okay.
I heard he's not
I
available.
spoke to him yesterday, and I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
Not to beat a dead horse, but
Yeah.
I didn't hear any hammering in the senior diner today.
Permits.
Permits?
Waiting on permits.
From our building department?
I was going to say, does somebody know somebody in this town that can get something done on that?
Somehow I think that would be a priority. Since it's town department.
Bill Cole was up there today talking to them. Yeah.
That's the guy to send.
So that hasn't started, so certainly no, November 11th not going to happen, right, or the Veterans Day?
Oh, no,
that's
nobody's
not
even
even
thinking
close,
about
okay.
that.
Yeah, they
All
had
right.
confirmed that, I think.
We gave that up years
Okay.
ago.
Well, that was still a pipe dream, I guess, last time we met, somebody was talking about it. Yeah.
Veterans have made other arrangements.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of our individual, our one-on-one meetings with the town departments, how are people doing? I know I've been copied on some of your emails, so I know you're working it.
Greg and I met with Craig from the cemetery
Yep.
Thursday.
Always a good conversation.
It is. You know, burial rates versus cremation, and the impact on burial fees, and very interesting stuff.
It really is. I just,
Birds
It is.
chewing holes in the roof.
Oh, yeah, the woodpeckers, yeah.
it's just such, he's just so devoted to what he's doing there. I
He
just,
is.
I love talking to him, so.
And then we met with Bill Cole later in the afternoon. Not Bill Cole, Jim Clyde over at Highway. And today I met with Sam, Sam Alvarez at the library.
Okay.
And tomorrow I'm meeting with Jonathan from Historical, and probably next Monday or Tuesday with Scott from Light and Power.
You got a full plate.
Yeah.
I've had contact with both Scott Wazinski and with Mike Fontaneller at the schools, and at the time I talked with each of them, they weren't quite ready yet, but by now I'm sure Scott is his budget in?
Is in.
It is
Yes.
in, okay. So Tom and I will be going to see them hopefully by this time next week.
And I've got police, COA, and the clerk on Thursday morning.
Okay.
And Park and Rec when Alicia's comfortable.
Okay, cool.
I have pretty much the finance team, and I've left them alone till they get through town meeting, and then Bonnie and I'll sit down. I'll probably meet with Keith and give him some advice and guidance.
I'll pay to watch.
Can we televise that?
Will that be televised?
I'll be glad to provide feedback.
All right, great. I haven't done mine yet either, so I'll get them to
Who
them
do you
this
have,
week.
Madam Chair?
You know, I think next time we have to switch them around because, there's some heavy hitters and then there's some lighter ones. I have a lot more of the departments that are one person and some admin and some office
Yeah.
supplies, and so we probably need to rejigger them next year to spread them around a little bit more.
I'm a founder, my personal feeling is it's nice to have both, one piece of a team be continuity and then another piece be fresh face, so that
Yeah.
you're just always
Yeah.
getting a little of both.
Mix
I
them up a
agree.
little bit.
Yep. So we'll put that on the list for next year to mix those up again and remix them, not only the assignees, but even the mixture of them, I think, so. Okay, so that's that, and then, what else? Oh, the minutes from October 6th, I think Marilyn sent out the adjustment ones, the amended minutes. Anybody want to make a motion? Is there any questions on those? Anybody have any
I'd point
motion?
out, I'm happy to have them go by as is, because nothing was inaccurate, but at each point, I remember having a comment in 3 different areas, which you probably all remember too. One was relative to the fire station discussion, and that was my comments about not seeing the need for the override vote if we already have a plan in place for that. Just wanted that to be a matter of record, but I think I've said that enough times. Similarly was the, when the fire department was here, I don't think it was recorded in the minutes that their plan for further expansion on the ambulance team was to be covered by expenses. And that was what was mentioned.
It wasn't, you didn't say that in the minutes?
Budget neutral.
Yeah, budget neutral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should amend them again. You should have said.
Well, then I should send Marilyn an email.
Yeah, I was
It just,
saying-
time got by me and I didn't
All
do
right, why
anything,
don't
so I
you
figured.
send-
Why don't we just hold it?
Okay,
Yeah, I
hold
think
it.
we should hold that.
All
'Cause I
right,
think those are
thank you.
important points, and your comments too that you want recorded, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
I
I'd
think
rather
that's
have them
all
in
it is.
there.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did we know she wasn't going to be here tonight, by the way?
Not yet, she's traveling again, so.
God bless her, she does.
She does pretty well.
Yeah.
Someplace exotic too, I don't remember which one this was, but it was another exotic
Spain
one.
one?
Spain
Oh, yeah,
or
this was
something,
Portugal,
something
right,
like that.
That's right.
So for town meeting, do we need to post for 6:30 for any reason? We don't have anything now we have to vote on, right? So, no?
Okay, you never know if something changes, though, you know?
That's why I didn't know if we should go ahead and post, and then I can just send something out and say, no, we're not going to meet?
Better safe than
Yeah,
sorry.
just post and-
All right.
Posted
That'd be
for the
safe.
6th of 10th.
And just, the subject, just, any town meeting business. And go from there.
Okay, and I talked about, hopefully Mike Lynn will come on the 10th. And then the 14th is the all-day. If Mike doesn't come on the 10th, we'll have to look and see whether we have much content, quite frankly. If there's other things that come up, if anybody else has. Obviously, it's a vote of the team, it's not me, I didn't want to
Right.
find that otherwise, but we can look at that. But hopefully he can come, because that would be interesting, I think, and then there's always some more budget things to do. Okay, so all day at the police station on the 14th, and that's what I got. Anybody else?
Nope, looks good.
Going once, going twice?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
So moved.
In favor, aye.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was quick.